After the college entrance examination, I finally mustered up the courage to hand a love letter to the most handsome man, who had been secretly in love with me for 3 years, but in a blink of an eye, I found it in the trash can outside the school gate. Feeling that I had lost my dignity, I ran away, and I didn't dare to mention that I had liked Joshua again. Years later, I worked as a journalist to interview today's upstarts in the scientific community, in the backstage interview room. A man with delicate facial features snuggled lazily in the sofa, his eyes squinting tiredly, and playing with his mobile phone without a match. Goodbye. I subconsciously wanted to run away again. Catherine, Joshua lazily called out to me from behind, his voice hoarse and breathtaking. Long time no see. I never thought that the next time I saw Joshua would be in the backstage lounge of the provincial TV station, because it was a temporary interview assignment. By the time I arrived in a hurry, it was already a few minutes later than the agreed time. Why is it so late? As soon as the people in the director team saw me, they began to complain dissatisfiedly. The people inside have been waiting for a while, and the station leaders are waiting there. Without explaining much to them, I smiled apologetically, straightened the Polytechnic card and pushed the door in. The lounge is not big, with 2 sofas and a long table. And the spider plants on the table are growing vigorously, as if with rolling water droplets. The leader of the station was sitting on the single sofa, and a young woman with long hair was sitting on the side of the couch, knocking her head down on the computer. And when she heard someone coming in, she glanced up coldly and said sarcastically, "The reporter of City NTV has such a big wrist." I looked at the leader, nodded, and said embarrassedly, "Sorry, there is a traffic jam on the road, and I am late for a while." The Taiwan leader waved his hand, apologized to Mr. Joshua, with a standard professional smile. I slowly shifted my gaze to the man on the other side of the couch. The man covered his head with a blazer and lay quietly on the back of the sofa, his long legs folded, his hands on his legs thin and pale, and his belt meticulously buckled. My heart moved slightly, and I vaguely felt that this figure was familiar. This interview task was originally Sister Anna's, and she was temporarily sent on a business trip, so she threw the interview task to me. By the time I saw this message and got the interviewee's resume, it was already 8 o'clock this morning, and it was only 40 minutes before the official interview, so I could only glance at each other's resumes while squeezing the subway. But strangely, there were no names or photos on them. In just a few lines, it summarizes all the information since the other party entered the industry. He was sent to Tsinghua University through a physics competition in the college entrance examination, and graduated from Stanford University with a Ph.D. in 2023. In the same year, he signed a contract to work in a top scientific research institute in China, and concurrently served as a professor at the School of Artificial Intelligence of Xidian University, the only Chinese winner of the meritorious award of the Cloud Award of the World Artificial Intelligence Conference. A very good and beautiful resume. With a sense of awe, I respectfully stepped forward to apologize. "I'm sorry." The man lying on the couch moved, and the next second, he sat up straight, and his blazer slid to the ground with his movements. Seeing each other's appearance clearly, I suddenly lost my voice and froze in place as if I was frozen. The man raised his eyebrows casually and raised his eyes. The moment they looked at each other, my heart skipped a beat. And then I stared at him motionlessly, and when I realized my gaffe, I turned my head away. The long-haired young woman hurriedly ran over and squatted down to pick up his coat, muttering, "You should be careful." "Okay." The man raised an eyebrow, and the mole in the corner of his eye jumped with it, and he gently withdrew his gaze from my face, and shrugged his shoulders absently. "I'm sorry, Catherine, what are you doing in a daze?" I snorted twice slowly, stiffly. Never mind." Boldly stepped forward, stretched out his hand, and spat out the words that had just been blocked in his throat. "Hello, Mr. Joshua. I'm the co-correspondent for this time. My name is Catherine." Joshua was replying to the message with his head down, and after listening to my introduction, he hummed lazily, "I know you." The interview was conducted in a dedicated interview room, there were directors and staff sitting in the audience. And even the leaders made a special trip to watch the whole process. The content of the interview is nothing more than asking questions about Joshua's personal experience and research direction. Joshua doesn't say much, and usually he answers what I ask. But his answers are often to the point. When asked why he chose the research direction of human-computer interaction and robotics, his eyebrows immediately lit up, like a real 17-year-old high-spirited teenager, wanton and gushing. In the interview room, the lights were dim, but the only thing I could see was Joshua's overly delicate and handsome face throughout the interview. Even though I reminded myself many times not to get distracted, I couldn't restrain my fugue when I looked at the face that was exactly the same as that of a 17-year-old boy for a long time. My first meeting with Joshua wasn't so earth-shattering and vigorous, however, in my freshman year of high school. I picked up a book of college physics with a gilded title after evening self-study, and because I couldn't find the owner, I temporarily put it in my drawer. A week later, a classmate sitting at the door suddenly shouted, "Catherine, someone is looking for you." I hurried out, tripped over the leg of the table, stumbled 2 steps, and immediately heard the chuckle of someone outside the door. Must be a very nasty person, I thought to myself in annoyance, and walked out. The disgust disappeared the moment I saw the boy outside the door, followed by the sound of a heartbeat like a drum. The young man was wearing white short sleeves and black trousers, lazily leaning against the wall of the front door. His figure was thin and straight. His skin was white and his eyelashes were long. The September sun was too strong. He squinted slightly into the distance, and the mole at the corner of his eye loomed. Hearing movement in the doorway, he turned his head nonchalantly. Looking at each other, the other party suddenly hooked his lips and smiled, revealing 2 cute pointed tiger teeth. "Hello classmates, I'm Joshua from the first and second classes of high school. Did you pick up my college physics?" 16 years old was too bright and dazzling, and from that moment on, the name Joshua. I remembered it for a whole decade. Okay, last question. I finally glanced down at the teleprompter and exhaled deeply. "Is Mr. Joshua married now?" When I was done, I stared at him and waited with bated breath for his answer. The interview room was quiet, and everyone was doing their job. "Nope." Joshua raised his eyes lazily, his gaze with his usual wanton laziness. "But I have someone in mind." The moment I heard the answer, my heart fluttered. It seems that the ending of the story has long been settled, and there is no possibility of overturning the case. There are countless self-deprecations pouring out of my heart. "Thank you, Mr. Joshua, for taking the time to speak with us." I stood up and bowed to him shallowly, and the director team sitting in the audience also stood up and applauded. As soon as the interview ended, Joshua was quickly surrounded by a group of people, including a young intern girl who had just graduated. When they heard that Joshua hadn't started a family yet, they gathered around to ask for autographs and contact information. I packed up my things and silently withdrew from the crowd. As soon as I walked to the door, I was stopped. "Catherine." Joshua raised his hand to push through the crowd and stopped me from afar. "Wait." Then he turned to the leader and said, "Let's have lunch later, and call Miss Catherine." Joshua is now a well-known figure in the scientific research community, and the leaders of Taiwan agreed to his invitation without hesitation. In the huge box, a large round table of purple and mahogany was set up, and with Joshua and his assistant Doris, including the leaders and staff of the stage, there were nearly 15 people seated. Before Joshua arrived, he changed out of the suit he wore for the interview. Now he is wearing a white sweater, sitting between the 2 leaders, with one arm propped up on the table, supporting his chin, and raising his eyelids lazily when he hears something interesting. Casually talked and laughed, and rejected the wine glass handed by the leader. I've never been socially friendly, and the only thing I can do on this occasion is to bury my head in food. Suddenly, the girl next to me raised her arm and accidentally knocked over the wine glass in her hand, and the wine flowed down the table, just wetting the fabric on her thighs. "I'm sorry, I'm sorry." The girl pulled out the stool and in a panic pulled out a few tissues and handed them to me. It was a trivial matter, but the girl's high-profile actions attracted the attention of everyone at the banquet. For a moment, the box was quiet. I became the center of everyone's attention. I was so embarrassed that I didn't dare to look up at Joshua's gaze. So I bowed my head and threw out a sentence. I went to the bathroom to deal with it and hurriedly left the table. I wore a white cotton skirt, which was conspicuous enough even for a small wine stain. I was standing in front of the mirror in a daze as I wondered what to do with it, when the screen of my phone placed on the sink suddenly lit up. The shrill ringing of the bell was like a talisman in the silent bathroom, bringing a heavy oppression. I answered the phone, held on to the pool, and hung my head expressionlessly. "Catherine, when are you going to get paid? Your dad has no money. And your brother is still waiting to pay his tuition. What's my business?" "Huh," I said word by word. "What does Gordon's tuition matter to me, you dead white-eyed wolf?" Seeing that he couldn't get the money, Dad George's voice immediately became sharp and harsh, and he blurted out endless abuse. "After your mother died in the first year of high school, I paid you the tuition fees for 3 years of high school, and there is no me for you to go to school. Can you be admitted to college and graduate school, you dead rabbit cub? You start to deny it when you become financially independent. You wait. One day I will make trouble with your unit. I'm not happy. You don't want to be happy. Stinky." I didn't finish my sentence and hung up, unscrewed the faucet, took a handful of cold water, threw it on his face, closed his eyes, and tried his best to restrain the surging emotions in his heart. When I raised my head again, my red eyes were reflected in the mirror, and the emotions in my eyes were unwilling and desperate. I closed my eyes, suppressed all my emotions, and lowered my head to open the bathroom door. I was caught off guard and saw Joshua at the end of the dark corridor. Joshua was leaning against the wall in a white sweater and black trousers, his eyelids drooping, his chin slightly retracted, and a coat in his hand. I struggled hesitantly, walked over and tentatively shouted, "Mr. Joshua." His eyelashes fluttered, his eyelids lifted, his eyeballs were pure black, and he looked at me steadily. "Catherine, don't you remember me?" I pretended to be calm. "What is Mr. Joshua talking about?" He looked down and laughed to himself, turning the expensive dial on his wrist without a match, his eyelashes drooping slightly. I heard him murmur, "Forget it." Then he handed me the coat in his arms. "Cover it halfway around your waist." The black and white casual jacket was the one his assistant wore in the morning. I took a step back, looked up at him, and shook my head. "Thank you." Looking at each other, he slowly frowned. "Have you ever cried?" I turned my head to prevent him from seeing my red eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Joshua, for your concern. If it's okay, I'll go back first." Without waiting for him to answer, I lifted my feet and left. Joshua suddenly called my name behind me. I looked back and saw him bending down and picking up a blue lady's wallet from the ground. I suddenly thought of something, and immediately changed my face and immediately ran towards him. In the next second, he flipped it open. In the transparent plastic bag on the front page of the wallet, there is a 1-inch bareheaded photo of Joshua when he graduated from high school. The photo is on a blue background. The neckline of the teenager's white school uniform is wantonly open, revealing the delicate collarbone under the slender neck. Joshua's skin is as white as jade. The short black hair is clean and neat. The eyelashes are shallow, and the thin lips are slightly pursed, revealing a little unhappy, as if he was pulled to take pictures before he woke up. Joshua closed the wallet, gave me a meaningful look, and handed it over. "Didn't you say you don't remember me?" I wanted to say something, but I found that no matter what I said at this time, I wanted to cover up, so I had to be silent. Was silent for a long time, but he was unwilling to let time pass like this. Calming down, I spoke again. "Joshua, Mr. Joshua." My voice and that of Joshua's assistant rang out at the same time. Doris walked up to this side in his high heels, saying as he went, "You're going to take my coat on the mat. It's cold outside." There is intimacy and coquettishness in and out of the words. She stood next to Joshua and threw me a haughty look. "Isn't this the wrist that was laid in the morning?" Why? I didn't know enough about the interview in the morning, and I still want to communicate with people behind my back in private. I happened to meet it. I put on a professional smirk again, took 2 steps back and distanced myself from the two. No more bothering you, goodbye, turning out of the corridor. I happened to meet the leader who had just returned from a phone call at the door of the box. After taking Joshua's exclusive interview report, he seemed to be in a good mood, and even took care of me with a few words. I see that you are not in a good state today. Why is your face so pale? I'll give you a day off in the afternoon. Go home and rest. With the leader's order, I left as fast as I could before Joshua returned to the box. I was really tired. So I slept on the bed and soon began to dream. In the dream, the first thing that came into view was a dim world, with extremely low visibility and black fog. Soon, a slender hand stretched out from above, and forcibly tore a hole in this dark space. And in an instant, the sky was shining brightly, and the clouds in front of him seemed to see the sun, and suddenly it became bright and open. 10 years ago, City and No. 1 high school stood before my eyes. My intersection with Joshua started with returning books, but it also stopped at returning books. Joshua is the god of learning for the whole grade, and has been the first on the honor list for many years. And the director of education once praised City and No. 1 middle school with tears in his eyes and emotion at the flag-raising meeting, saying that the presence of Joshua in City and No. 1 middle school is a blessing from the 100th anniversary of the founding of City and No. 1 middle school. Such a handsome, tall, and good student boy has undoubtedly become the dream lover of all the girls in the school. More than once, I met a girl in the hallway after class to hand him a love letter, and there was always a crowd of people around him. Joshua always leans idly on the railing with his hands in his pockets, listens quietly, and then bows his head and says sorry. Occasionally, I would stand in the back row of the crowd, secretly tiptoeing to watch, and after hearing his refusal, there would always be a little happiness in my heart. Joshua's class is next door to me, so I always leave a few minutes late from school just to get a few more peeks at him. But there are so many girls staring at him that I seem so insignificant. I clearly know that picking up and returning books is just a brief intersection point on the 2 parallel lines of Joshua and me, and when the intersection point passes, we will return to our respective life tracks. And there will be no intersection again. I've never been very greedy, and I know that Joshua is never a good character, so I don't have anything but admiration for him. But I didn't expect fate to play a big joke on me, and since then, I have been planted on Joshua and can no longer stand upright. It was an ordinary afternoon in the first semester of high school, and I was in math class, and I was looking down to take notes, when suddenly someone gently patted me on the back from behind. As soon as I turned my head, I saw the anxious face of the head teacher. He called me into his office and said many comforting words before getting to the point. Catherine, your mother went to the market to buy groceries, and she was hit by a truck, and there was no one on the spot. This news, for me, who was only 16 years old at the time, was like a bolt from the blue. By the time I rushed home, the small home was already stuffed with a bunch of relatives who were talking about how to bury me and who would pay for it, and even my father, who had been missing for 4 or 5 years, rarely appeared in the corner of the house. He smoked cigarette after cigarette in silence, and then waved his hand. How to save money. How to come. I don't have any money anyway. In the end, a group of relatives hit it off and made a decision that seemed to the adults to be extremely correct. The most cost-effective option is to move my mother's body into my grandmother's grave. However, my grandmother was mean and vicious when she was born, often scolding my mother, provoking my father and beating my mother. And the last thing my mother wanted to see was her. If my mother knew that her posthumous affairs were arranged like this, she would definitely feel humiliated. Get out. With red eyes, I walked up to the crowd and roared hard. Get out. I won't let you touch my mother. The discussion of my relatives gradually became quieter, and the eyes that looked at me were compassionate, pitiful, unreasonable, and ridicule. It was as if all my actions were fooling around in the eyes of this group of adults. No one is going to listen to a child. They stood on the moral high ground, accused me of being ignorant, locked me in a damp and dark basement, and held a humble funeral for my mother without permission, on the third day after my mom's burial. My dad George brought back an 11-year-old boy who said he was my younger brother, the youngest child. The mistress died, and the two of them had nowhere to live, so they occupied my mother's house and stayed with peace of mind. George said as he carried his luggage into the house, "Catherine, your mother is dead, and I don't have any money for you to study, so you should drop out of school early and go to work so that your brother can go to school, and we can have one of them get ahead." At that time, I had just brought the prepared dinner to the table, and when I heard this, I flipped the table in the next second. This was followed by a severe beating. His son, Gordon, took my hands on both hands, while George himself held a stick thicker than his arm, raised it high, and slammed it on my back. "Dead rabbit, you have a lot of skills, dare to lift the table." I survived the beating without saying a word, and while the two of them were asleep in the middle of the night, I sneaked out of the house and went to the pharmacy to buy iodine. The clerk looked at the crumpled green banknote in my hand and smiled awkwardly. "Little girl, there is not enough money." "I'm sorry." I resisted the urge to cry, silently took the banknotes and walked out of the pharmacy, then found a park and lay down on a bench. The pain in my back forced me to bend over and curl up. It was dark and silent, only the sound of insects chirping, and I gritted my teeth, endured the unbearable pain, clenched my fists, and tried not to let the tears fall. The pain in my back made me feel like I was on a hot grill, and I gritted my teeth and planned to get through it. "If you can't get through it, forget it." Her eyelashes trembled violently in pain, and her body began to tremble from the cold. The consciousness of holding on is diffusing little by little. Just then, I heard a clean juvenile voice. "Catherine, what are you doing here at such a late hour?" It was like a bright shadow piercing into the thick fog, and then gradually dissipating the darkness. I blinked, and there was a moment of clarity in front of me. Joshua was crouching in front of me, frowning, looking at me quizzically, his eyes black and pure. I shook my head, trying to smile to show that I was fine, but the tears flowed uncontrollably, and in the end, I gave up my resistance and just lay down in front of him, crying wantonly. The boy obviously hadn't suffered from this situation, so the comforting words blurted out seemed so clumsy and cute. You, don't cry. I'm most afraid of girls crying. If you have any grievances, you can go back and tell your parents. It's not safe to be alone here at such a late hour. It's okay if he doesn't mention it, but when he mentions his parents, I cry even more sadly. In the end, he gave up verbal comfort and began to pat me on the back helplessly, coaxing me like a cat. Okay, don't cry. I'll take you to eat something delicious." Joshua touched the wound on my back, and I hissed in pain, just in time to be heard by his perceptive eyes. He slowly lowered his gaze on my back, and after seeing my bloody back, he slowly pursed his lips and said in a cold voice, "Who did it?" Joshua carried me on his back and ran to the nearest hospital to hang up the emergency room. I lay on his back. My consciousness had begun to dissipate, and I could faintly smell the light mint citrus smell of the boy's body, like the cold soap fragrance of the thin sun. In a daze, I heard the doctor ask, "What is your relationship with the patient?" "I'm her brother." The boy replied without any slurry, "Back in school." It's already 3 days later. In the meantime, my dad couldn't find me, so he came to school twice in a row to make trouble. And now the whole school knew that I had a gambling addict and a grumpy dad. Since then, every classmate who passes by me always looks at me with a little sympathy and pity. The head teacher called me into the office and said, "Your father said that he can't pay your tuition and is going to withdraw from school, and the school can reduce your tuition fee considering that your grades are not bad. But you may need to figure out how to live on your own, as long as I can go to school. I'm willing to try anything." I began to live a life of studying hard during the day and working hard at night. Many places do not accept minors, but the owner of a night market stall saw that I was clever and willing to take me in. However, the night market stalls are a mixed place, and the men start to do things when they get drunk. As soon as I brought a plate of barbecue to the table, the man across the table immediately narrowed his eyes. "Little beauty," he whistled flirtatiously. How old are you this year? I ignored him and turned to go back to serving the food. The man suddenly got angry, stood up and dragged me into his arms. I was frightened, but I had no strength and couldn't break free from him, so I could only let him pull me into his arms. The stinking mouth was close to my face, almost spitting me. The boss was busy in the back kitchen, and the people around him looked indifferently, and no one was willing to come up to help at this moment. A bottle of green wine suddenly smashed on the man's head, and the man raised his hand in hindsight and touched the warm liquid in his hand. Immediately after that, his legs went limp and he collapsed to the ground. Behind him, Joshua's figure gradually revealed. The young man was dressed in white tee and black pants, with slender fingers, carrying half a beer bottle, and looked condescendingly at the man on the ground. The difference between cloud and mud. Joshua's eyes were filled with disgust. The man lying on the ground covered his head and kicked his legs twice, pointing at Joshua. And it took you a long time to piece together a complete sentence. Who are you? I'm your father. Joshua slammed the sentence down. Then he took out a black wallet from his pocket, took out dozens of $100 bills from it and threw them in the man's face. Go to the hospital yourself. If it's not enough, go to Cornell's house to report my name and get money. The man grabbed the money, and together with his accomplices, ran away in a panic. Joshua retracted his gaze, looked at me with a smile, and beckoned, showing two small pointed tiger teeth. Come eat with us when you're done. Joshua sat back down in the boys' pile, and they sat at the low square table facing the street in front of the store, eating and laughing. I went back to the store, brushing dishes and chopsticks around my apron, and I was only separated from him by a glass, but it seemed like a world apart. The boss approached me and asked, "Do you know him?" I put the washed dishes and chopsticks in the sterilizer. Classmate, it's just that, well, I thought you had something to do with him, but then I thought that if you really had something with him, you wouldn't be standing here washing dishes now. Well, is he amazing? You're his classmate, don't you know? Sidian Cornell's family, one of the richest people in China, is engaged in the high-end electronics industry. The group of boys sitting next to him are all top and rich, and seeing them here today also makes my little shop flourish. I'm ashamed to say that I have had a crush on Joshua for so long. I never knew he was from such a good family. So Joshua, who has such a good family, probably never knew that the wad of banknotes he threw out was something I had to work hard here for half a year to earn back. Joshua and I slowly got acquainted with each other. The barbecue stall was closed due to poor efficiency, and I was faced with the dilemma of looking for a new job. When Joshua found out, he offered to ask me to make up lessons for him, and he would be paid $1,000 per hour. I held his latest final exam transcript and couldn't stop laughing. Mathematics and science are the first in the grade. How do you want me to make up for you? Joshua didn't take it seriously at all, and said as a matter of course, "Isn't their language still holding back?" I stubbornly pushed away the boy's helping hand, not knowing whether to comfort him or myself. "It's okay. I can find it myself. You're not busy with a physics competition recently. Don't worry about me." His worried gaze fell on my face. "Catherine." I pretended to shrug my shoulders easily, sat down side by him on a chair by the river, raised my gaze, and looked at the sparkling river. "It's okay. It's going to be fine," struggling to pull away from the dream. He woke up and it was nearly evening. My first instinct was to touch my phone under the pillow, and the screen showed 6 missed calls from my dad. I was impatient and coldly threw my phone aside, finally couldn't swallow this breath, and finally transferred him 6,000 yuan. "The last time, if you come back to me and ask me for money, I will take a knife and die with you." Although I have been withdrawn from the dream, the tearing and suffocating feeling brought by that dream still lingers in my heart. I simply took the wallet key and went downstairs, intending to fill my stomach first. While waiting for fried rice, I suddenly received a call from the editor-in-chief. "Catherine, there's a problem with the computer on the director's side, and all the content of Joshua's interview in the morning is missing." A few purple thunderbolts flashed in the sky, and the torrential rain fell with a bang. and the bean-sized raindrops smashed to the ground like dense drumbeats. I stood in the doorway, indifferently staring at the splash on the ground. So what? The leader noticed that Mr. Joshua seemed to be interested in you, so the leader wanted you to come forward and arrange another interview. What if I won't? The other party was silent for a long time, and ruthlessly threw down a sentence. It's hard to find a job now, you can do it yourself. He hung up. I called back to the past, Editor-in-Chief. It's not a problem that I can't come forward now. The key is that there is a problem with the director. Why should I clean up the mess? Don't tell me so much. You just say you can't do it, right? Don't. With a snap, the phone hung up. I stood in front of the glass door of the store, exhaling wearily. The store is located on the busiest commercial boulevard in City N. Opposite the CC screen, one of the city's icons, on the big screen, Joshua and his research team are playing the VCR of the experimental research. Joshua's eyebrows and eyes are beautiful, which is especially pleasing to the eye on the big screen. And he is tall, and he is the top dazzle in a group. The little girl who was eating next to her was watching a video with her friend, and after Joshua flashed on the big screen outside, she immediately flipped the camera to the big screen and asked her friend to see. Damn, you see that man is so handsome. Girl, you're ready to fry rice. The boss handed me the fried rice with a smile behind him. You see that you are thin every time you come. As long as you fry rice, you are not even willing to add ham. I took the fried rice and habitually disguised. I don't like ham. Sitting in his seat with the packaged fried rice, he thought about it again and again, and called the editor-in-chief again in a low voice. I'm sorry, editor-in-chief. I just spoke a little rushed, and I immediately regretted it after hanging up the phone. Please don't take it to heart. As for what you just said, I will try my best to do it. The editor-in-chief quickly pushed Joshua's assistant to me on IG, but the response was even cold. Mr. Joshua has been very busy lately and has not had time to go. Please tell him again. Please, if I don't see him, I might lose my job. What's the matter with us? The next second this sentence was sent, the other party immediately sent me another photo. Joshua lay on his back in the back seat of the van, his thick eyebrows furrowed, as if something was bothering him in his sleep. Mr. Joshua is tired. Please don't bother us again. I called the other party, and it was cut off in the blink of an eye. Knowing that communication was hopeless, he also lost his temper in his heart, turned off his mobile phone, and pushed the door away with fried rice. The rainstorm came so violently that as soon as I opened my umbrella, the umbrella bone was blown off by the strong wind, and almost instantly, the overwhelming rain poured down on me, and I was so drenched that I couldn't even keep the fried rice I had bought so much. Simply broke the jar, held the umbrella and fried rice in his arms, and ran home in the rain all the way. The next morning, I was woken up by a death call from the editor-in-chief. What's the matter with you? I'm 5 minutes late for work, and I'm gone with full attendance this month. Struggling to get up from the bed, he hurried to the office with his groggy head on his head. But I didn't expect the editor-in-chief to suddenly change his meanness this morning. Kindly took my hand at the door of the lounge, and gave an unprecedented compliment. Catherine, this is a good job. I just told you last night. I didn't expect it to be done today. Plus bonus, I must add a bonus. Because of the cold, my brain was spinning very slowly, and I was still thinking about the meaning of this, when the door to the lounge was suddenly opened. Without any mental preparation, I crashed into those dark peach blossom eyes. Oh, I'm sorry to make you come here again. The editor-in-chief clapped his hands and stepped forward to play the round without leaking. Originally, Catherine was asked to take the team over. Joshua leaned against the doorframe, casually lifted his eyelids, and glanced at the editor-in-chief. The editor-in-chief immediately changed his words. You continue. I won't bother. Seeing the editor-in-chief go away, I flipped out of my bag and hung it around my neck at will, taking the lead and turning around. Mr. Joshua, come with me. The two of them walked silently for a while, one after the other, and when they reached the door of the interview room, I put my hand on the doorknob and was about to press it, when a bony hand came up from behind me and completely wrapped it around the back of my hand. Catherine, What did you want to tell me yesterday? I fixed my eyes on his white and slender hands, and pulled the corners of my mouth. It's nothing. As soon as the interview ended, Joshua's assistant pushed the door in. She sat down next to Joshua affectionately and confirmed his next trip. Mr. Joshua, the dean is going to invite you to dinner later. Please make sure you make time. This dinner is very important. Please don't be so willful as this morning, okay? Also, you were supposed to attend Professor Lee's academic conference this morning, and you were temporarily absent to change your itinerary, which made it difficult for me to do so. I didn't find out before that you had a penchant for helping others clean up the mess. As he spoke, he glanced at me meaningfully. To fight workers, you must be a qualified backstabber. I didn't want to embarrass the Taiwan leaders too much, so I sorted out the props, stood in front of the two and bowed shallowly. Thank you for coming today. I'm really sorry for delaying your time. There won't be a next time. Want to have a next time? The woman suddenly raised her tone, unforgiving. We can come today to give you face. If you hadn't begged me on last night, I would. Doris. Joshua let out a cold voice and glanced at the woman as if warning. Be aware of your own identity. The director called me over to confirm the interview script, and I nodded to the two of them to leave. As soon as he turned around, his eyes suddenly darkened, and the next second, his body instantly lost his balance and fell to the ground. Then he lost consciousness. When I woke up again, I found myself in a strange and luxurious flat. Outside the window, the sky is dim, countless high-rise buildings are towering. The river flows quietly in front of the building, the lights are on, and the scattered light is projected on the wooden floor through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The gray sheets and quilts, as well as the bitter woody scent that seems to be absent, indicate the identity of the owner of the room. Touching the phone. It has more than a dozen pending messages. As soon as one of the dialogues opened, George's phone rushed in. After being shut down by me repeatedly, he sent text messages instead. Your brother got into a fight with someone at school and sent someone to the hospital, and they asked us to pay 30,000 yuan in compensation. And my father really has no money. How much do you have on hand? Can you get some first? I figured if I didn't see it, and the next second. George sent me the address of the company. Are you working here now? If you don't give it to me tonight, I'll go to your company tomorrow and ask for it. I stared at the list of addresses, unable to believe that George had learned my business address. My white knuckles clenched into fists, trembling slightly from too much force. After all, he threw in the towel. Call him and don't want to say anything. The other end chattered about his son's crime. It wasn't until he finished speaking that I gritted my teeth, almost pleading, and said, Dad, will you leave me a way to live? If you want living expenses, I will give them. Your son will go to school. I will help. You want a house. I will move out. Next. What else do you want me to do? You can finish it all at once. Do you want me to go crazy or do you want me to die? You say, I'll do it now. The other party did not take a step back because of my softness, but instead made inches. I don't want you to die, and I don't want you to be crazy. I can't get 30,000 yuan tonight. I'll go to your company tomorrow to make trouble. You can figure it out yourself. The other party hung up the phone, and I sat on the bed with my legs crossed, raised my head, and wiped my tears with my fingers. Press WeChat and send a message to a colleague to borrow money. I waited for a long time, and what I waited for was either not to reply to the message, or to excuse myself. Only Frank, a friend I knew from college, silently transferred me 10,000 yuan. Catherine, I have to pay off the mortgage this month, as well as the rent. You can use the money first, and I will try to make it up for you in the next few days. Frank is also an ordinary man, whose family is in the countryside and went to college on his own. After entering the society, it is also difficult. I returned the 10,000 yuan to him. I extinguished my phone and hugged my legs on the bed for a long time. Finally made up my mind, pull open the door barefoot and rip off Joshua's headset as he was playing a game. The game was interrupted, and he raised an eyebrow and looked at me quizzically. Yes, I turned my head, not daring to meet his gaze. And realizing that such a plea was not sincere, I forced myself to look into his eyes again. Dignity and pride are almost broken, and endless inferiority and embarrassment grow unchecked. I muttered, "Can you lend me $24,000? I'll pay you back on the 15th of next month." Whenever he says no, or asks what the money is for, I immediately apologize for my recklessness. Joshua plucks the wheat from his neck and places it on the table. He tore up a blank piece of paper and wrote 2 lines on the paper with a wave of his big hand, a 1-month IOU of 30,000 yuan. I was stunned, and then hurriedly explained, "I don't need so much, I still have some money on me," and then, I was stunned. Not understanding what he meant, Joshua stood up and circled me in the small space in front of him and his computer desk. His back was slightly arched, his eyes were parallel to mine, and his eyebrows were lazy and cold, a deep gaze with a sense of insight. "You give all the money to your dad. What are you going to do for dinner this month? Steamed buns with boiling water, pickles on rice, or boiled so-mein noodles in plain water every day?" Joshua's voice was slightly cool, but his breath was burning between his breath. "Catherine, do your own calculations how much you gave up for them, and how much more are you prepared to give in? You are." Preparation. He leaned closer, his eyelashes almost close to mine, his eyes calm and clear, and he asked word by word, "Let them kill you." The lighting in the room is cool-toned, and the furniture casts unsettling shadows in the icy light. The air seemed to freeze, and every breath had to be exhausted. "Joshua is so sensible and clever that she can see all your thoughts by looking into your eyes." My heart was almost beating out, and I turned my head silently, but he pinched my chin and turned it around with ease, forcing me to look up into his eyes again. His pretty eyes were swirling with obscure emotion. He said word for word, "In the first semester of the 2nd year of high school, at 11:30 in the evening of December 17th. The alley outside Chunhua restaurant was not a wildcat at all, but your father." Joshua's national physics competition finals are in mid-October during the first semester of her sophomore year. During that time, he was so busy that he often didn't come to school. Joshua doesn't come to school very often, but legends about him still circulate on campus. It is reported that his father Simon reached out to the field of automobile research and development, forcibly tore a piece of meat from other people's mouths, and successfully won a place in the automotive field, and the Cornell family advanced several places again on the list of the richest people in China. Joshua himself won the first place in the physics provincial preliminaries and provincial semifinals. This undoubtedly gave the school a lot of face, and the principal pulled up a large banner in a high-profile manner and made an exaggerated propaganda poster to hang in front of the teaching building. I was introduced by my homeroom teacher to tutor a first-year junior high school student on Saturdays and Sundays for an hourly salary of 25 yuan. On Saturday, it was already 10 p.m. when the tuition ended. My parents paid me my first month's salary. On the way home, wrapped in a thick coat and carefully digging $2 out of my pocket, I bought a roasted sweet potato on the street and walked downstairs to finish it. Push open the door and get home. Gordon sat down in front of the TV and put a handful of snack chips into his mouth. George sat on the couch with a thick wooden stick and smiled. "Hand over the money." I grabbed my bag alertly and took a step back. Turning around to run, he caught up from behind, grabbed me by the tail, dragged me into the house, and closed the door. I watched the door of survival get farther and farther away from me. George pushed me to the ground, rammed the stick down, landed on my shoulder, and I was beaten around the house by him and finally cornered. Seeing that the stick was about to fall again, I reflexively clasped my head tightly with both hands. George played tricks, withdrew the stick with his backhand, reached out and grabbed the bag I was pressing behind my back, and pulled out 1,000 pieces of crumpled sweat, counted with his saliva-stained hand, with a greedy look, "Rich again." Then he said to me viciously, "Next time, if you dare to hide money privately, I will beat you to death." He shouted out the door, "Gordon, didn't you say you had a crush on your sister for a long time? Come here." I was lying on the ground, my eyes red, Gasping for air, George went out and locked the door. By the way, 12-year-old Gordon crouched in front of me, looking a child mismatched maturity and his eyes full of strange infatuation. Sister, you are really beautiful. As if he had been robbed of his soul, he held out his hand to me. Let me touch you. I watched him lunge at me, and a sense of despair came over me, and my body spasmed unconsciously. After my mother's death, I was chronically underfed and extremely thin due to malnutrition, so naturally I was no match for Gordon. I forgot how I had fought my way out of Gordon's men that night. I just remember clutching my torn warm clothes tightly and rushing to the kitchen to get a knife and putting it around my neck. He yelled at them, "If you dare to mess around like this again, I will kill myself, and when others come to investigate, none of you will be able to escape." George glanced at me, lay on the couch and munched on melon seeds, not taking my hysteria seriously at all. I walked to the bedroom and slammed the back of my knife into Gordon's back. George felt sorry for his baby son and came over and slapped me a few times. My hair was messy, my face was pale as paper, and I laughed maniacally, and slowly raised my knife. "George, if I'm gone, who's going to make money for you and pay off your gambling debts?" He was probably frightened by the way I looked, or maybe he thought it was really worth the loss. He looked at me stunned. After a long confrontation without gunpowder, he lost. Throw down a sentence. Pay $2,000 a month in the future. He pulled Gordon and went downstairs. As soon as they walked on their front feet, my body instantly collapsed on the ground like a deflated ball, staring numbly at the void in the air. Who should I call? My stiff eyes moved. And then I walked downstairs like a marionette to a public phone booth. Mechanically dial out the number you know by heart. Joshua didn't tell me his contact information, but when I was handing in my homework, I saw the student information sheet of the whole class on the desk of the second class teacher, and the top one was Joshua's, a long, cold ticking sound, repeated several times, as if possessed. I repeatedly and mechanically typed in the numbers and dialed them again. The last time, it was finally connected. I slowly opened my mouth with a whispered cry. "Joshua, hello, the phone here is showing an unfamiliar number. Who are you?" It's a girl's voice. I suddenly lost my voice. She couldn't hear me and asked, "Did you just say Joshua? Are you looking for him? I'm calling him over now." The other side was noisy and full of laughter. "Joshua, someone is looking for it." The background voice is an unfamiliar male voice. Who's looking for Joshua at this time? I don't know. Strange calls. Hang up. Harassing calls. Have fun with Joshua. Don't spoil the fun. Joshua, hurry up. It's your turn to play the cards. This time you lose. It's more than just a Ferrari. Cut. Competence. Joshua on the other end snorted disdainfully. I silently hung up, curled up in a corner of the public phone booth, and fell into a deep sleep. In order to survive, I got another job as a dishwasher in a small restaurant. A week later, in the bathroom after class, I met a sister on campus lying in front of the mirror, wearing thick makeup. Someone stepped forward and quipped, "Yo, why are you willing to dress up today?" The corners of the first sister on campus were almost uncontrollable. "What do you know? I heard that my male god is going back to school today." "Really? Where did the gossip come from?" "Listen to his brother." "Then don't say it." The principal is quite calm. "The hero is back, and he didn't say anything about the flag-raising ceremony this morning." Needless to say, Joshua knew that the principal had made a poster of his picture and hung it on the honor roll for a week, and got off the plane last night and rushed straight to the principal's office. I heard that the principal was so frightened that he asked someone to remove the banners and posters overnight, and he didn't dare to mention it again. I deliberately bypassed the two of them and went farther away to wash my hands. When I came out, I saw a group of people crowded at the door of the second class, blocking my way. Joshua was surrounded by a crowd of people, his head hanging slightly, his hands lazily in his pockets, and his lips pursed unhappily. The first sister of the campus rushed up from behind, jumped high with her hand on the railing, and shouted, "Welcome Joshua." The voice of the first sister on campus was bright and loud, which naturally attracted Joshua's attention. Unfortunately, the first sister on campus was standing behind me. In the last second of Joshua's gaze, I turned away with my head down, making a long detour back to work. As soon as he returned to his seat, the math class representative took the English test paper and asked the question. In the first high school, my grades barely managed to squeeze into the upper middle class, but fortunately, my English scores were not bad. Almost always at the top 5 of my grade. I wiped my wet hands with a tissue, took his English paper, and saw the answer at a glance. In the process of explaining to him in detail, he suddenly approached me and said, "Catherine, did anyone say you're good-looking?" I was so focused on the test that I didn't hear exactly what he was saying, and I foolishly replied, "No." During the self-study in the evening, the head teacher held a temporary class meeting and dragged on for half an hour. I looked at the clock on the wall, and my heart became more and more anxious, blindly thinking that you are going to be late for an hourly job. It is time to deduct your salary. Finally, when the head teacher said it was over, I picked up my school bag and rushed out of the classroom. At the height of the staircase, I was crowded in the crowd, silently calculating how fast I would have to run to reduce the amount of money. Suddenly, someone tapped him on the shoulder from behind. I looked back and saw that the math class representative had 2 papers in his hand and asked with a silly smile, "Let's go to self-study later, shall we?" "No, I have something to do." I simply refused. He scratched his head. "Okay, let's do that another day," squeezed down 2 flights of steps, and was tapped on the shoulder again. I was bored, thinking that it was another representative of the math class. So I turned around and said in an unkind tone, "I said I won't go. I have something, and you are not finished." The words came to an abrupt end. My eyes widened in disbelief. Joshua was carrying a shoulder bag with delicate features and a small mole at the end of his eyes, standing on the steps 1 step higher than me, his back straight, and the zipper of his school uniform jacket open. His hands were in his trouser pockets, his hair was disheveled, and his hair was raised high, as if he had just woken up from bed, and he was too boyish. Looking at each other, he blinked stubbornly. "Catherine, do you want to see what I brought you?" He handed over a black box, in which lay a watch with a brown strap and a white H dial. I didn't recognize the brand. I just saw a series of capital Hermes letters written on the dial. I tried it on my wrist and looked at it again and again, liking it so much, but worried that it wasn't affordable for me. "Foreign brands, it's expensive, right? How much?" "I'll give it to you. It's not expensive." Joshua squinted slightly with a lazy expression. "Don't give it. Next time it's my birthday. You can just give me a birthday gift." "Good." I unzipped my bag, pulled out my math workbook, and tucked my watch inside. Joshua's eyes twinkled as he watched my movements. Walking to the school gate, I waved at him. "See you tomorrow." He reached out and grabbed my bag and dragged me back, frowning. "You didn't go that way when you used to go home." I moved. I slowly pulled his hand away, and the wind blew, ruffling my hair and covering my reddish eyes. "You don't know?" I smile. The stupid Joshua. Joshua's birthday is November 20th. For this rich young master, I really can't think of what he lacks. Late autumn is approaching. Joshua is not dressed properly, and after a basketball game, a cold wind blows, and he successfully causes himself to catch a bad cold. As soon as Joshua got sick, the whole school panicked. The principal ran to the office 3 times a day and told the second-class teacher to care for and love this national treasure. The head teacher of the second shift got the order and called Joshua to the office twice in 3 days and asked him if he wanted to take leave to go to the hospital. The girl even stuffed a bag of cold medicine into the hole in Joshua's table. During one class, Joshua's stern chemistry teacher asked Joshua to take out his book, and Joshua reached into his desk and pulled out 5 pockets of cold medicine. He put the medicine on the table, spread his hands, his face was full of innocence, and said in a nasal voice, "Teacher, there are no books, only medicine." I accidentally heard from my neighbor Emma that osmanthus nectar warms the stomach and dissipates cold air, and it happens that she still has the newly picked osmanthus flowers this autumn. So I sneak into her house every night when the father and son are asleep to learn how to make osmanthus nectar. I finally got it before November 20th. on November 20th, it was a Saturday. And the Davis father and son went out to visit relatives. At the end of school on Friday, Joshua gave me an address and said that I could just call him or sign up when I got there on Saturday. I glanced at the address, the clubhouse at No. 28, Da Hung Road, Linjiang District. On Saturday, I took my pocket money and secretly went to my sister's house next door to ask her to do my makeup. My sister asked me to sit in front of the mirror and trim my eyebrows. She said, "Catherine, have you ever found that your temperament is actually cold? Standard goose egg face, very excellent facial features, round eyes and straight nose, ruddy and full lips, and white skin. If you clean up well, you will definitely become a big beauty. You have a good foundation. Light makeup is more suitable for you than heavy makeup." When she finished putting on her makeup, I looked in the mirror and it was really beautiful. She was going to give me clothes to wear. I shook my head and went home and put on my white sweatshirt and skinny jeans. I don't want my mind to be too naked. I changed buses and subways, and by the time I got to the place Joshua was talking about, it was already 8 o'clock in the evening. An hour later than he said, the guard at the door stopped me and asked me to show my ID. I held the osmanthus nectar tightly in my arms and whispered, "I know Joshua." The guard smiled contemptuously. "I know Joshua a lot, and I know him too. The key is whether people recognize you or not." I didn't speak, my eyes turned away, and my attention was drawn to the building in front of me. An elegant and solemn Chinese building is located among the overlapping shade trees, faintly revealing a little of the unique charm and beauty of Chinese architecture, a corner of the bustling city, which is like a paradise. I was so excited along the way that I forgot what the teacher had said in class. Linjiang District is one of the best commercial land in China, and every inch of land is valuable in the real sense. Cars kept coming in at the door, and I only knew one of the signs, Maybach. What the eye sees is stronger than what the ear hears. I laughed ridiculously and sarcastically, walked up to the security guard and bowed slightly. "Thank you. Thank you for waking me up from a big dream." I handed him the osmanthus nectar. "You can drink this, it's good for your throat." The security guard shook his head. "I don't dare to accept it, in case young Master Shen really knows that I took something that originally belonged to him. Then my job will be gone." As the autumn breeze picked up, I found a leeward place, sat down, and curled up in a ball. The only thought that came to my mind was that Joshua asked me for a birthday present, so I had to give it to him. It seems that I have been waiting for a long, long time, and my hands and feet are cold and numb. I'm about to fall asleep. Through the low bushes, I heard the voice of the security guard. "Little master, have you ever seen a girl here?" He was about 17 years old, about 165 tall, very thin and white. "She came an hour ago, but I didn't know her identity and didn't dare to let her go, so I guess she's gone." "Right." Joshua was not heard. The security guard's voice sounded again. "Little master, let me ask more. Who is she?" "A friend of mine." Joshua's voice faded into the wind. I quietly hugged my knees and stared at the wet marble floor. A pair of black and white AJs appeared in front of my eyes. I blinked, looked up and smiled. "Joshua, you're here." He just bent down, and as soon as I looked up, I pressed the tip of his nose to him. His eyes facing each other, his eyelashes tangled, and his breath intertwined. Both of them were stunned. I came back to my senses, tilted my head to the side, and handed him the honeypot in my arms. "Happy 17th birthday, Joshua. I don't have anything to give. I made it myself. You have a bad cold some time ago. I heard from my neighbor that drinking this is good for your throat. You can take it." Joshua's eyelids twitched, and he quietly looked away, and said, "Thank you." The cold wind ruffled my broken hair. I raised my hand to hang the loose broken hair on my ears again, took a few steps back, and smiled softly. "It's windy outside. You go in. I'm going to leave too." He frowned. "Aren't you going in?" "No. My mom urged me to go back to my homework. My lies are at my fingertips." He took out his phone from his pocket and pressed it. "I'll let the housekeeper send you." "Don't." It was rare for me to refuse so plainly, and it caught him off guard. Confusion rose in his eyes, and it was the first time I had seen such emotions in this high-spirited teenager. I waved my hands and ran away into the distance, my hands clasped together in the shape of a trumpet, and shouted, "Joshua, goodbye." From that day on, I started to walk away from Joshua at school. It is customary to go for a run or do recess exercises during recess, but I was not feeling well, so I asked the teacher for a leave. In the empty classroom, groggy lying on the table shook slightly, but I didn't care, rubbing my head sleepily in my arm. Suddenly, I remembered that I hadn't had time to take the medicine I had prescribed in the morning, so I planned to get up and get hot water first. As soon as he looked up, he was caught off guard and crashed into a pair of obsidian eyes. Joshua sat reflexively on the front table and stool, one elbow propped up on my table, his long eyelashes drooping, his eyebrows slanting. I blinked. "What are you looking at?" "Nothing." He hid the emotions in his eyes and glanced at the pills on the table. "Got a cold?" I picked up the thermos and got up to get the water. He took the cup of water, and when he handed it over again, it was filled with hot water at the right temperature. "Thank you," I whispered. "Oh, I'm tired." He is a dead pervert. If it doesn't suit his wishes, he will punish us for running. Neurotic, exhausted. The famous loud voice in the class shouted at the top of his voice while fanning the wind and stepping into the back door. The next second a complaining voice came. "Damn, I'm on the wrong shift." "No, it's a class." The loud voice went back to look at the door number, repeatedly confirming the location. "Why is Joshua in our class?" Then he saw me, raised his hand and rubbed his eyes, pointed at us and stammered, You. Joshua sneered, put his hands in his pockets, walked to the back door, and threw a sentence indifferently, "I made a mistake." The results of the National Physics Finals were not long in coming. Joshua successfully entered the national training team and was sent to Tsinghua University. The principal made a special trip to hold a commendation meeting, and the award speech was written in such a way that Joshua was blown into the sky. Joshua's parents also made a special trip to attend the commendation ceremony, and the last process was for Joshua's parents to take the stage with him to receive the award. Joshua pursed his lips and looked unhappy, as if he had been forced to come up by his parents. The wind on the stage moved, the national flagpole was blown and trembled, and the national flag was hunting. I stood in the audience and watched him for a long time, motionless. Suddenly, he raised his eyes and looked at me from afar. December 17th is the day of the winter vacation of the second year of high school. I told the restaurateur early that I would be there early today. As the winter vacation approached and there were more customers, I was so busy that my feet didn't touch the ground, and by the time the store closed, it was close to 11 o'clock in the evening. Snowflakes floated outside, fell to the ground, and spread a white layer. My boss paid me my wages and waved at me to go home early. I lifted my umbrella, lifted the curtain, and said goodbye to my boss. There is a long staircase outside the restaurant, which is slippery because of the snow. I carefully held on to the railing and descended the stairs steadily. When I got to the last step, I suddenly stepped on the air, and when I saw that I was about to fall to the ground, a hand suddenly grabbed my arm hard. After thanking me, I pulled out my arm, but I found that I couldn't pull it. Doubts raised their heads. It's Joshua. His black coat was open to reveal the thick white sweatshirt underneath, and a pair of black Smart Martin boots were fastened with meticulous laces. He looked down at me and said, "It's late." The breath exhaled from speaking condensed into a white mist in the cold air, and dissipated in a blink of an eye. "There are too many people." I pulled out my arm and walked side by side with him. "Why are you here?" "Listen to what the fat man said. He passed by here for self-study next night and saw you working here." The fat man is the disciplinary committee member of the second class. Hearing this, I began to pinch the corners of my clothes uneasily, and cautiously asked tentatively, "Do all the people in your class know?" He threw a sentence, "I don't know." The snowflakes landed on my eyelashes, and I blinked and pulled the corners of my mouth. "That's right." He stopped abruptly, turned around, and looked at me steadily. "Catherine, are you really short of money? Here comes the moment to uncover the disguise." For a long time, I didn't talk about money in front of Joshua. Even though he met me a few times when I was a freshman in high school, but the answer I gave at the time was that my parents were working too hard, and I thought I could earn a little bit of money. He knew that my family was not in a good situation, but he didn't know how difficult my family was. He is the pride of the sky, and he would never have thought that there would really be people in the world who would work for 200 yuan. If he knew that I was working all the way around just to avoid a few beatings, what would he think of me? I hate to see that kind of sympathetic gaze, so I racked my brains to think about the wording of the disguise, and wanted to say that I am not short of money, and I work to experience life, or, what does it matter to you if I am short of money, why do you care so much, or, if you admit that I am short of money, can you lend it to me? For a while, 1,000 excuses came to my mind. Trying to regain my self-esteem, at the end of the day, however, I didn't say anything, just exhaled a deep cool breath. Joshua, you don't understand. Where would a proud boy tolerate others saying that he didn't understand? He immediately retorted, If I say, I raised my eyes and looked at him fixedly, the words clear. Last year at the night market stall, I hoped I was beaten down by you with a beer bottle. I saw Joshua and my eyes widened in disbelief little by little. I felt that the world was ridiculous. My eyelashes trembled, and I whispered, the money you threw out casually is my living expenses for a year. The snowflakes shook off, and in the blink of an eye, a thick layer of the ground was spread, and the world was quiet. The boy bowed his head and apologized. I'm sorry. I thought that your family conditions may not be very good before you came out to work, but I didn't expect. The sound of explanation in my ears faded away. I stumbled upon a glimpse of George and his son, Gordon, standing quietly in the shadows of the corner of the long alley, staring at the place, breathing stagnation in an instant, like a basin of ice water suddenly pouring down from the heavenly spirit cover. A chill from head to toe immediately pulled Joshua and turned to walk in the opposite direction, and I didn't stop until I finally couldn't feel the 2 lines of sight. What's wrong with you? It's fine. I bent over my suffocating chest and gulped in the fresh air. I saw a cat, and I'm afraid of cats. Joshua gently patted me on the back from behind to help me get on my feet. I closed my eyes. A tear rolled down from the corner of my eye, and when I opened my eyes again, there was already a little more fierceness in my eyes. Joshua, let me tell you, we have already talked about it today. I won't look for you in the future, and you don't bother me. The snowflakes fell between his eyebrows and hair, and the boy looked at me quietly, his eyes dark and he couldn't see any emotion. All of our intersections were carefully designed by me, and I deliberately approached you because I knew you were rich. I stared at him deadly, and the words I said were like quenched poison, vicious and mean. But now that you know the truth, I'm tired and don't want to play. You get out. Don't come to me in the future. Judging from the time I spent with Joshua, I found that he disliked people who were full of lies, sycophants, and vicious and mean, so I thought that saying that would make him hate me. Unexpectedly, in the snowstorm, he suddenly spoke. How much? His eyes were fixed on me motionlessly, and he neatly took out the black wallet from the pocket of his padded jacket, slapped it heavily in his palm, his back straight, and his gaze was still calm and steady. How much? 10,000, lakh, million. Is 30 million enough? How much will it take you and me to continue like you used to? I didn't hear him say anything, and my attention was drawn to the long, dark, narrow alley behind him. Unnoticed, 2 dark shadows were approaching him. George can't be made aware of Joshua's existence. This is the only thought in my near standstill brain. In desperation, I raised my hand and slapped Joshua hard. The wind howls and the snowflakes fall. My tears followed. Joshua, get out. Don't get stuck in my sludge field. Joshua is the pride of the sky, a star-studded figure holding the moon, who has met since childhood did not put him on the tip of his heart, held it in his hand for fear of falling, and held it in his mouth for fear of melting. Where did the proud teenager suffer such humiliation? Joshua tilted his head to one side, hanging silently, unaware of what he was thinking. After a while, he looked up, glanced at me with a blank face, and walked around me without mercy. I looked back at him and finally smiled with relief. "Catherine, who is he?" George's eerie voice rang out behind me. The fact that I fainted in the interview room and was carried away by Joshua caused a big stir in the stage. At lunchtime, a colleague from the next desk came to me and asked, "What is your relationship with Joshua?" I stuffed a mouthful of rice into my mouth and pretended to be stupid. "Partnership, he is Partier's father." "Come. You fainted that day, so you didn't see it. When the stage leader was talking to Joshua, you turned around and fell. Joshua immediately pushed the stage leader away and picked you up from the ground. At that time, we were all frightened. And the Taiwan leader said that he was going to call 120, but Joshua touched your forehead with his chin and said that you had a fever. That action, TSK, is so skillful that it seems to be done like it often. He said he had fever reducers at home and wanted to take you away. We were embarrassed at the time. Who didn't have fever medicine at home? His mind was too obvious, she chattered as I quickly pulled the rice from the bowl and got up. "I'll go first, after work." I met Frank downstairs in the office. When he heard the news that I was going to borrow money last night, he thought I was in some trouble and asked for the company's address to see me. I thought that everyone was coming, so I took him directly to the nearest restaurant and invited him to dinner. Frank is still the same, and the weight of life has not weighed down his shoulders, but has made him more and more mature. He said his parents were urging him to get married. "Catherine." Frank swallowed nervously, and the hand on the table slowly moved closer to me. "You think I'm—" The second half of the conversation was interrupted by the ringtone of my phone. It was an unfamiliar string of numbers, and I made an apologetic gesture and pressed the connect button. "Catherine." Joshua's voice was leisurely and casual. "Your ID card has been left at my house." My mind was so big in the morning that I forgot what I had brought and what I didn't have. "I'll get it later." "No, I don't," Joshua said. "I'm right across the street from you, and you just come out." I followed Joshua's words and looked out. A black Porsche Cayenne was parked discreetly across the road. The driver's window was open, and Joshua was staring at it with his head propped up on one elbow. I said to Frank and hurried out of the table. "Cross a road and come to Joshua." Joshua lifted his chin. "Come up." Once in the car, Joshua stopped talking. I had to say first, "Thank you, Mr. Joshua, for taking the time to bring me my ID. I was entangled in my heart, so it shouldn't be rude." "Who said I sent it to you?" Joshua had a stinky face and a bad tone. "You go over and get it yourself." "Huh, I'm a little confused. I can't understand Joshua's operation." "Then come over and—" "I'm here to inform you. I'll wait for you here for 3 minutes at most, and if you can't get out, you'll go by yourself." I trotted all the way back to the restaurant, thinking about how to explain it to Frank. Frank's smile was a little forced, like the man who was in good spirits just now. Frank said, "Catherine, your phone just left on the table, and your dad called. And I was afraid that there was something urgent, so I took it for you." The hand holding the chopsticks paused unnaturally, and then I pretended to be casual and asked, "And then?" "Sorry, Catherine, I didn't know you were borrowing money for this. I don't think my mom would approve of a family like yours." I moved my lips and smiled slightly self-deprecatingly. "It's okay." He wanted to say something more, but I raised my hand to stop him. "No need to apologize. I'm used to it." I followed Joshua to his house. Footsteps stopped at the door. "I won't go in. Please, Mr. Joshua, send it out for me." Sir. He glared at me unhappily. "Are you out of words other than Mr. Joshua? Or have you forgotten my name?" "My name is Joshua." "Oh, good. Although I don't understand why he is entangled in the surname." In order to get my ID card as soon as possible, I still decided to smooth his hair first. "Shout and listen, Joshua." He lifted his chin triumphantly. "That's right. Come in." I stood in the doorway with obvious rejection on my face. He sneered, and changed his slippers and went in. "You can pestle there yourself. I'm going to sleep." Soon there was a sound of rushing water inside, and with the sound of the bedroom door closing with a pop, there was no movement at all. Reluctantly walking in, I knocked lightly on his bedroom door and there was no response. "Didn't you fall asleep?" pushing the door directly. A human figure arched out under the gray quilt on the bed. I lay on the edge of the bed and patted the quilt. Joshua, where is my ID card? In the next second, the quilt lifted a hole, and a hand reached out from the quilt to grab my arm and pulled me forward with a backhand. The quilt was put back on, and the darkness of the 5 fingers could not be seen. The set of movements was so smooth that I didn't even have time to react. I lay in Joshua's arms, not daring to breathe. He hugged it a little tightly, his hot body heat ironing against his skin through the fabric. He had just taken a shower, and the light scent of agar wood and shower gel on his body were intertwined, hitting my nostrils. He leaned in, his lips rubbing against my ear, the heat of his breath making my heart tremble. Catherine, are we in a relationship? If it weren't for the Davis fathers and sons, I don't think I'd hesitate to say yes. But no one is obligated to help my partner fill the bottomless economic hole, and I know that, so I don't want to drag Joshua into the water. Joshua can be high-spirited, arrogant, and disdainful of anyone and anything, but you can't let anyone else handle it. Pushing him away vigorously and lifting the quilt, I got up and stood on the edge of the bed, took the ID card on the table, and poured a basin of cold water on him mercilessly. Not good. The atmosphere in the room instantly dropped to freezing. He put his hand on his forehead, his long eyelashes twitching up and down, and laughed at himself. What is this? The next afternoon, as soon as I finished a meeting, I received a WeChat message from Joshua's assistant. If you don't come and see it, everyone else will burn down. The text is followed by a picture of a thermometer at 39 degrees. I was ruthless and sent a sentence. I'm not studying medicine. It's useless for you to look for me. You're so vicious, Mr. Joshua is blind to take a fancy to you. I just turned it off, out of sight and out of mind. In the end, I was worried, and I was restless all afternoon, and the press release I wrote appeared several obvious mistakes in a row. A colleague at the next desk came to quip. I am not active in work, and I have a problem with my thinking. I forced a smile. In the evening, as soon as I came out of the bathroom, Joshua's call came in. Catherine, the voice seemed to be soaked in alcohol, with a slightly hoarse drunkenness. I'm drunk. Can you pick me up? I unconsciously wrenched my heart. Aren't you still having a fever? He chuckled lowly at the other end, and looked like he was struggling. Probably, I don't know. After a moment of silence, I finally gritted my teeth and asked, where are you now? Where? He repeated in a low voice, reacting in a slow half-beat. The Weston bar. Sure enough, it was at the bar, and I exhaled heavily, took the keys and took a taxi to the address. He said, as soon as you enter the bar, the smoke fills the dance floor, illuminating the bewildered expressions of men and women. I looked around and finally saw Joshua in the corner. He was sitting with a group of brothers, playing cards. I pursed my lips and walked over with mixed feelings. Joshua tossed a card and moved it inside, motioning for me to sit behind me. His brother's probing, inquiring gaze lingered on my back, and I unconsciously straightened my back and sat down beside Joshua with a slightly stiff movement. Tell me about it. Joshua threw out a card, her eyelashes pressed down, and her tone was nonchalant. The woman I've liked for 10 years, Catherine. The man sitting across from me nodded thoughtfully. If you hadn't brought her here today, I'd almost suspect that you have a special fetish. You. Joshua kicked him in the leg. My sexuality is normal. Immediately, he changed his mouth and shouted, sister-in-law, don't shout. Joshua leaned back on the couch and said lazily, I didn't catch it. Someone scoffed. Finally someone can cure you. After speaking, he said to me again, Miss Catherine, you have to hold on. Don't let him catch up easily, from childhood to adulthood. Our little master has what he wants. He has not experienced the pain of not being able to ask for it. You have to let him hone and temper. Shut up. You didn't hear him just say that he liked it for 10 years, and he has been in pain for 10 years. How long do you have to temper him? Don't talk about that. Someone saw that my face was wrong, and immediately changed the subject. Miss Catherine, where are her parents? A worse topic. I forced a smile on my face, and I wondered if I should just get up and leave. Suddenly, Joshua flicked his hand and threw all the cards on the table. It's boring. He bent his legs, his elbows propped up on the countertop. Lazy, rogue child, don't play. After saying that, he directly pulled me up and waved his hand back. Let's make another appointment. When I got out of the bar door, I immediately shook off his hand and sneered. What kind of high fever doesn't go away? I see you, Joshua, are doing a great job. He pursed his lips aggrievedly, and his forehead was directly pasted. You touch. The hot heat suddenly pressed against my skin, making my heart tremble. He just stuck to me, not intending to stay away. His long eyelashes swept up and down on my eyelids, and he asked me in a hoarse voice, disenchanted, I don't know why, the group of people who sat with me just now, 2 of them were listed companies at home, 1 grew up in a small provincial college, and the other was engaged in tourism development at home, almost monopolizing the country's tourism resources. Now that you know who they are, what do you think? They also have 2 eyes and 1 mouth. They will do it when they eat, drink, and lazard, and they will make nasty jokes, and they don't live as high and unattainable as you think. The nature of human beings is social, and the only thing that makes you different from them is interpersonal relationships. So Catherine, you have nothing to be inferior to. The poverty and toils of my original family, the panic and poverty imprisoned me like an airtight cage. And the inferiority complex and sensitivity that I had borne since I was a teenager made me choose to shy away when faced with the gap between me and Joshua. For a long time, I have been calmly and soberly drawing a well-defined line between me and Joshua. But now, he crossed the 38th line strongly, took my hand, and told me that everything was not a big deal, you and them. It's just a difference in relationships. If you will, I want to take you into my life and connect with them. He took a few steps back, stretched out his arms wantonly, and smiled proudly. Catherine, look at me. I stood there and stared at Joshua not far away, my eyes moistening. In a trance, I saw the bright and proud 17-year-old boy. 10 years ago, I chose to slap a teenager in the face of my bold confession when I was confined to my original family. So now, do you want to keep missing out? I almost wavered in my heart. Should I try it? I asked myself. Well, then give it a try. I'm going to lift my feet. The phone in your pocket rings at an inopportune time. Hey, Catherine, we're in City N. Get off the train at 3 o'clock tonight. You remember to pick us up. It's George. I clutched my phone tightly, and a stream of chi and blood rushed straight to the heavenly spirit cover. I didn't transfer the money. What are you doing here? The house is mortgaged, and we have no place to live, so we can only come to you. I lowered my head and silently put down my phone. Raising his hand again, he called Joshua's assistant on WeChat. Mr. Joshua is drunk at the Weston Bar. You can pick him up. Closing his eyes, he walked up to him, and because of his drunkenness, his eyes were sparkling and very good-looking. He looked down at me and smiled contentedly, his eyes black and pure. I stood on tiptoe and touched his cool lips like a dragonfly, then quickly pulled away and stepped back. Don't make a fuss, I said. I'll call your assistant on WeChat. She'll come and pick you up later. I'll go first. I saw the hope in his eyes peel away little by little, and something collapsed into powder in an instant. As the Chinese New Year approaches, the number of customers at Chunhua restaurant is gradually decreasing. On the 30th day of the Chinese New Year's Eve, the boss settled the wages of the past few months for me. Happy New Year, Catherine, and may you succeed in your studies and progress in the new year. As he spoke, he handed over another thick red envelope. I took the red envelope, only to feel flattered, and I didn't know whether to accept it for a while. The boss waved his hand. Take it, it's New Year, buy yourself a new dress. Also, the store may not open next year. My wife is sick, and I have to go back to my hometown to take care of her next year. I'll tell you in advance, you should be mentally prepared. Gathering and dispersing is the norm in the world. I said goodbye to the boss and turned to walk out of the restaurant. Snowflakes began to float in the sky again, and a plum blossom sticked out obliquely from the low wall, and the stamens were slightly pink, which was particularly gorgeous and moving. Walking out of a long alley, across the road is the river, and the people of City N rushed to the river to wait for the annual fireworks to go off. after a 10-second countdown, a beautiful arc rushed into the sky, bursting into a crackling cluster of brilliant flowers in the dark night, fireworks on a snowy night, and everyone's faces were filled with festive smiles. I stood at the back of the crowd and watched it for half an hour, then bowed my head and turned around. I saw Joshua standing behind me. He wore a long black padded jacket with a zipper wide open, revealing the white sweater underneath in a high-profile manner. The young man's skin was white and his eyes were dark, and the snow lined his black hair with extra brightness. Beside him stood a slender girl with curly hair, with the same letters on her clothes as Joshua's, who looked to be about the same age, and the girl was smiling and holding the sugar gourd to Joshua's mouth. Talented and beautiful, she is very right. I tugged at the corners of my mouth and nodded, intending to walk from the side. The moment I turned my back, someone grabbed my arm from behind. I turned around, and Joshua pursed his lips. The emotions rolling in his eyes were mixed and obscure. He probably didn't want to get revenge for the slap that day, I thought to myself, and I didn't think Joshua was the kind of person who hit women. After thinking about it, I couldn't figure out what he was holding me for. Then wish him a Happy New Year. I raised a bright smile. Happy New Year, Joshua. Who is Joshua? I heard the girl ask behind me. Joshua's fingers pulling at my clothes loosened one by one, and his eyes returned to clarity as he looked at me, and with a taunt tugging at the corners of his mouth, he replied, I don't know. George and his son had to go back to their hometown to visit relatives in the 1st and 8th days of the new year, leaving me alone at home for the new year. On the 4th day of junior high school, I met a neighbor's aunt who had just returned from exercise downstairs in the community, and as soon as she saw me, she pulled me aside in a Shinto way. Catherine, your dad didn't do anything to you that day, did he? I raised an eyebrow for some reason. Oh, just that night. I think about it, it's been almost half a month. It snowed heavily that night, and in the middle of the night I saw you walking back with a limp after your father and your brother. With my aunt's words, my thoughts unconsciously drifted back to the night of December 17th. I picked up a rock and smashed my foot after Joshua left. And when George asked who the other person was, I cleverly told a lie. He was the bully of our school, and when he saw that I was a bully, he came to me to collect protection money, but all the money I earned was given to my father. And where was the money given to him? So he was injured. Really, George wasn't convinced. Yes, I told him that my dad is the one here, and if he dares to come to me again, I'll go home and tell my dad. Then what did you just pull him to run? I'm afraid that you will be discovered by him. He will beat you together. I don't want my father to get hurt. Apparently, George enjoyed the compliment from his daughter, and he came up to me and patted me on the shoulder, just warning me. Keep a low profile at school and don't mess with people you shouldn't mess with. It's over. After hearing this, the eldest mother nodded clearly, and said to herself, Fortunately, you came back with your father at that time. You probably didn't pay attention. There was a person who followed you all the time, and after you went upstairs, that person was still standing downstairs in your house for a long time. I look good-looking, white and clean. How can I do this kind of stalker? When my aunt said these words, I had already turned and walked into the distance, so I missed it, with the Davis family returning from their home and son. My good days came to an end. George was lying on the couch, squinting and smoking. Catherine, how much money are you going to make in the new year? Dad doesn't ask you to be rich, just pay $2,000 a month, and you can keep the rest for yourself. Gordon was lying with him, game console in hand, and said poorly, Sister, work hard to make a good life for me and Dad. One day, over dinner, George suddenly asked, Catherine, do you know City and Cornell? I thought it was another topic related to his stock trading, so I said indifferently, I don't know. Is there a lone seedling in Cornell's house? What is his name? Joshua. I think he is also in City and no, one middle school, and you are in the same school. When will you meet him? That kind of rich people. Sprinkling water can make poor people like us worry about food and clothing for the rest of our lives. Spit out the name Joshua out of George's mouth is simply the greatest insult to Joshua. I slapped my chopsticks coldly. A rich man has seen a woman who eats more salt than you. Why do you think he will take a fancy to me? My daughter is beautiful. It's not me who blows. My father is at least qualified, and he agreed to let you go to school. Your face, this body. If it were placed in our hometown, now the children would be called Grandpa. When George had money, he wasn't so neurotic. He could communicate, and he could not do anything. Can you dream less? How old are you? I was so disgusted that I recklessly scolded me directly. If you say this kind of thing again in the future, I will go directly to drop out of school. Find a roadside beggar to marry, and see how you do your spring and autumn dreams. Okay, I won't say it. I won't say it. Won't I mention it? Why is there such a big reaction, really? At the beginning of the second semester of high school, the principal suddenly announced that Joshua had passed the competition and had successfully been admitted to Tsinghua University, and would not come to school again in the future. As soon as the news came out, everyone wailed, and the dreams of countless girls were shattered on the same day. I went about my life step by step. One night a week after school started, I had just come home. And George immediately pulled me aside and looked at me with a blank look. Catherine, I went to see that picture of Joshua, and he looked exactly like the guy who was talking to you in the alley that night. You say, did you lie to your dad about something? Hearing this, my eyelids jumped heavily, and the blood in my body accelerated to my scalp, and my mind went blank for a moment, and then, I heard myself ask, look at how your face is so white. Dad just asks. George grinned, revealing the furrows on both sides of his cheeks, dissipating most of the horror. By the way, people from the community came to the door today and said that I got a job as a security guard. It's very easy. You are about to take the college entrance examination. Don't work in the future. Dad will support you. I stood numbly in place, stunned. There's only one thought in my head. If George knows, let George know about Joshua's relationship with me. So what should I do? I forgot how I walked back to my room. It wasn't until I sat on the bed, and my body completely touched the entity, that I gradually came back to my senses. Thankfully, Joshua had his back to George that night, so George was only suspicious and didn't dare to make any real moves. Smiling sadly, I crouched down on my knees in the corner of the bed, curling myself up in a small ball. Wait, my brain reacted slowly. Just George said he wanted me to read. The idea of whether Joshua would come back to school went viral on campus for a week before it became silent. Is about to enter the third year of high school. Everyone has really entered the state of learning. And even the back row of scumbags who are usually idle have begun to write hard. I don't have to worry about tuition fees anymore. I am focused on my studies, and my grades are improving rapidly. In the midterm exam in May, I managed to finish in the top 10 of my grade. That night, the head teacher deliberately left me behind and said a long words of encouragement. I have forgotten the specific content, only remember one sentence. The meaning of life is experience. Catherine, you must study hard, meet different people, experience different things. Don't be confined to the small world of the original family. At the entrance of the school, there was a traffic accident just now, so it was crowded. I was in the middle of the crowd, thinking about the unsolvable physics problem during the self-study tonight, and for no reason, I thought of Joshua. If it were him, he would have seen the answer at a glance. I was thinking about it when I suddenly heard a loud reminder, "Girl, be careful." I looked up in confusion and was horrified to find a car speeding towards me, less than 5 meters away. I was stunned, and I didn't know where to run for a moment. The next second, a hand pulled me over, and at the same time, the car whizzed away from behind me. I was pulled into my arms and hugged tightly, and the light mint citrus smell spread between my nostrils, and my eyes were wet for a moment. Okay, I hate to admit it, but Joshua, I really miss you. This little girl. Don't you look at the road when you walk? I knew it was a red light and ran it. Passers-by woke me up that this was on the main road, and that George could see it at any time, even though I was reluctant. I silently walked out of his arms and nodded shallowly. Thank you. He withdrew his hand, naturally tucked it into the pockets on the sides of his pants, and looked down at me and asked, "What are you thinking?" physics, I said. I can't do it, show me. He held out his hand to me. I pulled out my workbook and handed it to him. He propped up the back of the book with one hand, swept his eyes quickly, and then made 2 quick strokes on it with his pen. This. He leaned down and leaned towards me, set this formula. As I listened, I drifted away, and my eyes fell on his fluttering eyelashes, staring at him without blinking. That's it for the end. Do you understand? He turned his head in surprise, his long, narrow eyes meeting mine, close enough to hear the intertwined breathing. I took a step back and took the book. Got it. Thank you. Since the end of the last senior high school entrance examination, this year's sophomore has really become a senior high school student. Every minute counts. The college entrance examination is my only chance to change my fate and get rid of the Davis family, father and son. The time of the 3rd year of high school passed quickly, and it was the days before the college entrance examination. In a blink of an eye, the school called all the students back and organized to take student and graduation photos, according to the class order. After we finished filming in the first class, the students in the second class were soon on. I was on the other side of the playground, taking a group photo with my classmates, when I suddenly heard someone shouting, "Yo, Joshua is back. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'll take a picture later," and give Joshua a C position. Joshua, the first sister on campus, ran over exaggeratedly. "How long have you not been back to school? You miss me to death." After taking a photo with my classmates, I went to the class leader with the camera and asked her, "Can you take a picture of me and the second class?" The squad leader understood. I want to be in the mirror with Joshua in the second class. No problem. In this way, I stood far away, with all the students in the second class taking a group photo in the background. Click. After the shooting, I didn't stay in the playground too much and went straight back to class. When I passed the honor roll, I saw a 1-inch photo of Joshua posted on the list, crumbling in the wind. The photo is on a blue background. The neckline of the teenager's white school uniform is wantonly open, revealing the delicate collarbone under the slender neck. Joshua's skin is as white as jade. The short black hair is clean and neat. The eyelashes are shallow, and the thin lips are slightly pursed, revealing a little unhappy, as if he was pulled to take pictures before he woke up. I smiled and lifted my hand to take it off. "I'm sorry for the trouble I've caused you. So please take another picture with Joshua." The college entrance examination lasted for 2 days and passed it smoothly. After the college entrance examination, George bought me a new mobile phone to reward me. The day after I got my new phone, I received a strange call. "Catherine, it's Joshua's voice." I was sitting at my desk writing and drawing, and the sun was shining through the window, reflecting the spider plants on my desk. "I'm at the entrance of City No. 1 middle school right now." His voice was inexplicably hoarse. "My flight at 6:30 in the afternoon. When will you be back?" "Maybe it's only for 2 months. Maybe it's never going back." "Didn't you escort Tsinghua University?" I frowned. "You're not coming back to study." He chuckled at the other end. "Catherine, the college entrance examination is not the only way out for me." "Yes, I forgot. The Gaokao is the only way out, only for the poor." I hummed softly, all the way. There was a long silence for each other, and the sound of cars whistling and honking along the street came from the other end of the phone, mixed with noisy background sounds. His voice is exceptionally clear and firm. "Catherine, I want to see you now." Hanging up the phone, I sat in my chair and subconsciously glanced at the clock. 4 o'clock. I picked up the pen and continued to look down at my unfinished paintings. It is an impression painting of the sun piercing through the dark clouds. At 5 o'clock, the sun began to sink in the west. On the food stalls walking through the streets and alleys, the sound of selling sounded one after another. I'm still obsessed with painting. It wasn't until the bedroom door was pushed open that George said in a loud voice, "Catherine, I bought fish and stewed sauerkraut fish at night." I woke up from a dream, threw down my pen, and ran out like crazy. As I approached the gate of City No. 1 middle school, I gradually slowed down and felt a little inexplicably excited. The sunset is obliquely reflected on the sliding door at the door. reflecting a piece of dim and ambiguous light and shadow, like a thick and colorful oil painting. Little girl, who are you looking for? The security guard poked his head out of the security booth. Joshua. I was sweating profusely, and my anxious voice was still wheezing. Is Joshua here just now? The security guard clapped his hands. Coincidentally, isn't it? He just got in the car, and you came. I guess I haven't gone far now. Why don't you call him and ask him to come back? I said forget it. When I turned around, a sense of loss came to my face, and there was a feeling of emptiness that my feet did not touch the ground. His eyes were sour, his heart seemed to be pinched by an invisible hand, and he didn't know where to lift his feet for a while. When I got home that night, I spread out a piece of paper and wrote a few strokes. Joshua and I met in September of our freshman year of high school. In order to reduce the burden on my family, I took up a summer job at a coffee shop after the college entrance examination. The sky in June is changing, just sunny and then cloudy. Dark clouds gather together, obscuring the intense sunlight. A blue Bentley pulls up in front of the coffee shop. A noble and beautiful woman with her hair tied and wearing a solemn blue cheongsam walked into the store. Hello, what do you need? You're Catherine, aren't you? The woman's necklace with a valuable pearl necklace was dazzling. For the past year and a half, my son Joshua's account has shown that he has won 5 million money transactions with your father George. Let me find out what is going on. With a sudden shake of his hand, the coffee he was holding suddenly spilled on the ground. A brown liquid diffuses little by little on the smooth marble tabletop. I subconsciously looked down for a long time before I slowly and incredulously raised my head. What do you say? Combined with Joshua's mother's words, I gradually pieced together a less complete past. Around the Chinese New Year in my sophomore year of high school, Joshua found my dad. He said that he would be responsible for our family's monthly expenses, as much as he wanted, on the condition that I would not have to work anymore so that I could go to school properly. My greedy dad, who doesn't know how to restrain himself, the lion opened his mouth wide and asked Joshua to pay him 30,000 yuan a month. Joshua agreed without thinking. After the college entrance examination, Joshua directly called George 1 million, on the condition that no matter what I did in the exam, it would not stop me from going to college. And the phone named commendation after the college entrance examination was selected by Joshua for George to give me. I see. The protective case I carefully disguised had already been seen through by Joshua. Pulling out my phone, I called George with a blank face. Come to my part-time job. I have something to tell you. What? George took a cigarette in his mouth and mumbled, go to work, not coming. I'm calmer now than ever, coldly threatening. I'm going home at night and I'm going to kill you. While waiting for George to arrive, it suddenly rains. Dark clouds stirred in the sky, winds howled, and torrential rain crashed violently against every inch of land. George pushed the door open and patted the rain on his body. Dead girl, you'd better have a valid reason for me to come here when it's raining. Where's the card? What card? He looked puzzled. The card that Joshua gave you money on. I stretched out my palm and said in a calm tone, hand it over. I don't know what you're talking about. George pretended to be calm and took a few steps back. I'll go first if it's okay. I stood up, picked up the coffee cup on the table and threw it at his head. Crackling shards exploded on his head and shattered along his back to the ground. Did that kid Joshua tell you? I knew that he was unreliable. It was he who came to me. It was he who said to keep it secret. Don't let you know. I didn't expect me to contribute money and efforts, and now he has sold me directly. He walked around, looking a little impatient. I grabbed him by the hair and pressed him against the window, making him look out, his eyes scarlet, and screaming hard. See, that's Joshua's mother's car, and his mom came to the door. Do you think rich people are stupid, can't find out? Here, unexpectedly, George was even more excited, rushed straight into the rainstorm, and opened the car door. You're Joshua's mother. My daughter talked to your son, and it was my daughter who suffered, and we won't tell you more. Just give me 3 million for damages. The woman looked at him coldly, as if she was looking at a neurotic, seeing that she didn't believe her. George took out a piece of paper from his bosom in a panic and handed it to Joshua's mother. Look, look, this is evidence that my daughter is in love with your son. I saw the familiar piece of paper. And something exploded in my head. Joshua's mother grabbed the letter between her two fingers, glanced at George contemptuously, and then threw it out mercilessly, and the letter swirled in the air before falling into the rain, soaking wet. I know my son very well. He can't possibly take a fancy to your daughter. Maybe have you ever thought that it was just your daughter's wishful thinking from beginning to end, she said coldly. Impossible, George roared. If your son is not interesting to my daughter, how can he put $1.5 million on my card and, Mr. Davis reminded me, the woman interrupted him, raised her slender jade finger and touched her hair elegantly, and said unhurriedly, I have already called the police on suspicion of fraud against you, and if you can't return it within a month, a lawyer will come to your house immediately. You have to believe it. City N. Cornell's legal department. George wanted to say more. I rushed up, got down to my knees, and grabbed George's trouser leg. Dad, don't talk about it. I beg you to save me some face. Don't get in my way. George pushed me to the ground, rubbing his hands together excitedly.
George was shoved by the police and put in a police car. I stood at the door of the company building and watched him go crazy with a cold eye. In a place that people can't see, the hand at his side trembles slightly, and there are still lingering palpitations of escaping death and the fear of the unknown in his heart. The cold hand was suddenly taken up, and he looked up and looked at Joshua with a confused gaze. What if he comes back? Joshua shrugged his shoulders lightly, seemingly not taking it seriously at all. I'll talk about it later. George made a lot of noise, and everyone in the office came down to see the commotion. There were many people standing in the lobby on the first floor of the company. As soon as George left, Joshua and I naturally became the objects of the show. You go back first, and I'll go up. I suppressed the strangeness in my heart, put my hands behind my back like a little old man, looked up at him and smiled. Thank you today. Joshua pouted unhappily. That's it. The next second, I tiptoed close to his ear and whispered, I get off work at 6 o'clock, you can pick me up. He looked down abruptly, his gaze at me full of ecstasy. After what happened just now, the eyes of my colleagues looked at me strangely. I went back to the office, and the male colleague who had betrayed me just now followed suit. Catherine, I'm sorry. I was bad and almost hurt you. It's normal to sit idly by, but it's immoral to help the abuse. I ignored him and secretly told myself not to associate with this kind of person in the future. The colleague at the next desk stretched out his head, curious as if he was a baby. You two really become, I graciously admitted. The joy that the corners of his mouth could not suppress. Oh my God. The colleague held his face with his hand, and his movements were very exaggerated. When you first came, I was still thinking, such a beautiful little girl must have talked a lot. And when you said that you hadn't talked about it, the people in the office couldn't believe it. Originally, someone from the next group also asked me privately about you. Then he gave up, for a strange reason. What does he think? You have a very cold, mysterious, broken temperament he can't control. When it was finally time to get off work, I was the first to rush out of the office, seeing the Porsche Cayenne downstairs in the distance. I deliberately slowed down and pretended to walk over as if nothing had happened. As soon as I walked to the side of the car, the rear door was suddenly pushed open. Joshua's mother, dressed in a navy blue cheongsam and holding her new Chinese-style side-coiled hair, sits upright in the back seat. I was stuck in place as if I had been nailed, and I didn't dare to come closer. 10 years ago. Her sarcastic and contemptuous words are still ringing in my ears. Hesitation. I lifted my legs, stepped forward step by step. The movement seemed a little difficult, and nodded. Hello, Auntie. She didn't even lift her eyelids. I stood still, not knowing what to do. Joshua pushed open the driver's door and stepped down, taking my hand and standing with me. Mrs. Cornell, he shouted nonchalantly, his eyebrows cold. Introduction, my girlfriend, Catherine. She pulled her lips, snorted coldly, and scolded. Death will not change. She turned her head and looked me up and down. Just for this woman, you hated me for 10 years. 10 years ago, you shouldn't have gone to her. Joshua's calm words were rebellious and cold. You're taking too much care of me. You, Mrs. Cornell suddenly raised her slap, and endured. But she was reluctant to fall. Forget it, Mrs. Cornell exhaled in compromise. 10 years ago, you had to raise money for me to sell your house, and I have already changed my opinion of you, and then I heard Joshua talk about you. And I felt a little admiration. She took off the beautifully crafted plum blossom pure gold hairpin she was wearing on her head and handed it to me. Catherine, this hairpin suits your temperament, and I gave it to you. Turning out of the elevator on Joshua's floor, he pulled me along, and his footsteps suddenly became extremely fast. I trotted to barely keep up with his pace. Pushing the door open, I was pulled in by him, and before I could catch my breath, he suddenly leaned up and pressed me against the door. A kiss with eagerness and ferocity fell like this. Joshua's kissing skills are not very skilled, and can even be called clumsy and rude, as if he had exhausted all his strength. He tightly wrapped his arms around my waist so that I had nowhere to escape, and I was forced by him to lean my neck back, grabbing the corners of his clothes with my fingers, and my black coat was crumpled so that I could no longer see its original form. After a long time, he finally stopped, and turned his head to my neck. The intimate breathing of the two of them mingled together in the confined space. Finally kissed you, he said. Approaching the October Golden Week, there are many things going on in Taiwan. When I came out of the company, it was already 10 o'clock in the evening. My rental house has 2 months left before it expires, and if I quit early, the landlord will not refund the deposit. Considering that it would cost thousands of dollars to quit the lease early, I turned down Joshua's offer to move in with him. The house I rented was in an old neighborhood, with no property and no security. The street lights in the neighborhood are dim, and the walls are mottled, reflecting the dark shadows under the trees. I walked over and my shadow was reflected on the wall. Soon, a dark shadow pulled out of the wall again. I swept it with my peripheral light, and a chill suddenly appeared in my heart, and I secretly quickened my pace. I didn't get rid of the figure until I turned downstairs in the unit. It's not the first time, since the day before yesterday, I've noticed that people have been following me behind my back. I pursed my lips and sent Joshua a message. I look like I'm being followed. As soon as this message was sent, I suddenly remembered a person, Gordon. In an instant, cold sweat spread all over the body. At the same time, there was a knock on the door at the entrance. Immediately after the sound of a lockpick, I jerked my head and a raised stick swung at me. My head was dizzy, and I blinked my eyes several times before I could see the environment in front of me clearly. It was an empty abandoned factory with cracked walls and dusty walls. George was sitting not far away, talking to someone. You just go to that kid from Cornell and say he wants to see his woman again, and come here with 5 million cash. Yes. Ask him to buy 2 more train tickets. If you don't see anyone for 2 hours, I'll kill Catherine. Yes, just say it. If he wants to call the police, let him report it. I'll see if the police's gun is fast, or my knife is fast. I ran out of there. And he has already committed so many things, and he is not bad at this one. George hung up and turned to look at me, grinning cruelly with yellow teeth. He said in a fluttering tone, Catherine, you're awake and come to see the play. I shuddered. George crouched in front of me, his rough, swarthy hands touching my face, squinting triumphantly. My good daughter, you are supposed to be born for your father in this life. Do you know why your surname is different? Your mom didn't tell you. But your mom and I divorced when you were 3 years old. So, when I took Gordon to live in your house, in fact, you only had to call the police, and the police could arrest me for trespassing. But who knew that you were such a waste? I would have beaten you to death, and you didn't dare to move. He sighed. What a good daughter of my father. After that, he suddenly changed his face, grabbed my hair and slammed my head against the wall, and his voice was fierce. Whether that Cornell kid comes here or not, you have to die. Your father, I can't get used to seeing you live a good life, understand? I was knocked into a spark in front of my eyes, my head tilted to the side, and I took the opportunity to take a big breath of fresh air. Raising his eyes and staring at him, he approached me. Look at it, a bastard like your mother, a dead dog who didn't know how to resist when I beat it to death. Something that had been pressing on the bottom of my heart seemed to be about to break through the ground, and a screw began to loosen on the iron cage that imprisoned me. I turned my head and vomited a mouthful of blood. My long hair was messy, hanging down to cover my eyes, unusually calm. Is it true that what you just said, that my mother had divorced you a long time ago? George hooked the corners of his mouth with a disdainful expression. What if you know it now? Don't you still let me beat and scold me for so many years? He clapped his hands, stood up and turned his back to me. I'd like to see how much that Cornell kid has used you so much that he knows it's a dead end, and he dares to. in the second half of the sentence. I didn't let him say it successfully. George put his hands around his neck, blood oozing from his fingers, his body gradually losing strength, tilted to the side, and looked at me with a gaze full of disbelief. You. The shards of glass in my hands hanging down my side were dripping with blood, and I looked at him indifferently. A rusty railing on the iron cage broke and fell, and then, like dominoes, one or two countless iron railings also broke open in an instant, and the torn cage collapsed to the ground. As the dust dispersed, 16-year-old Catherine stood up and walked out with determination. I snatched the dagger from George's hand, straddled him, and held the hilt in the air with both hands. No. George kicked his legs outward, trembling all over, trying to convince me. Catherine, my good daughter, you can't do this. Good, put down the knife. Okay, if you kill me, you're going to go to jail. You can't be with Joshua anymore. Right, you calm down. The words came to an abrupt end. The abandoned factory reverberated with a pig-killing wail. On George's right shoulder blade, a silver dagger was studded with blood. I shoved the shard of glass into his hand, pulled open the collar, took his hand, and slashed myself deeply from under my collarbone to my chest. I did all this with a blank face, and my heart was calmer than I had ever been. Reach for George's cell phone and dial 110-120. Sitting down beside him, I turned my head and smiled coldly. My good father, you are really joking. I call it legitimate defense, the last 4 words, biting out of weight. When the police and Joshua came, I was holding my legs, curled up in the corner. My long hair disheveled, covered in dust and bleeding. George lay on his side on the ground, clutching his wounds and shouting, "My daughter has killed someone. Comrade police, don't you care?" When Joshua saw me, he strode up to me, pulled me down the neckline, and suddenly changed his face. I grabbed his hand and tears rolled down my face. "Joshua, I hurt so much. Go to the hospital." He couldn't help but pick me up. I put my hands around his neck, my head resting on his arms. And the heart I was carrying really fell at this moment. He's going to kill me. I lowered my eyebrows, pointed at George, and said, "I'm not overly defensive." The policeman raised his hand to stop me from continuing. "You go to the hospital first. Our people will come to you in the next few days to find out the situation, and then Miss Catherine will tell you the truth." I nodded, then leaned my head back on Joshua's shoulder, found a comfortable position, and closed my eyes. George's injuries seemed serious, but in fact they were all off the mark, and after a few days of treatment in the hospital, he was taken back to the police station without any major problems. Instead, my inconspicuous injury was much worse than George's. I had a full-body checkup in the hospital. The doctor handed over the medical examination report to the police, shook his head, and sighed. "Some of them are old injuries, at least 10 years, the bones are out of place, and then they grow again." I leaned back on the hospital bed, and Joshua sat at the head of my bed, looking at the medical report, his eyelashes tight, his anger suppressed, and he didn't say a word. In order to alleviate the oppressive atmosphere, I raised my hand to touch his eyebrow bone and half-jokingly teased, "Why are you so serious? It's not all over." He put the crumpled medical report on the table, moved down, and reached out to hug me in his arms. "I'm sorry." He suppressed his emotions. "If I had known that you were living like this in high school, I would have taken you away early." "It doesn't matter." I touched his thick hair over and over again as if soothingly, and I forgot what I muttered, and I only remembered one sentence. "It's all over completely." On that day, Gordon was instructed by George to go to Joshua to ask for money, and Joshua gently tricked me out of my address, so Joshua later did to bring the police to find me so quickly. Gordon is a coward. He fights with people at school, provokes people who shouldn't be messed with, and when the other party catches up with City and Gordon, he flaunts the name of Joshua's brother, and the other party hears the name of the Cornell family. And he doesn't dare to do it for a while. When Joshua learned about this, he went to the door to invite the other party to a meal, and at the end, he leaned back in the dining chair, holding a wine glass in one hand, with a careless sneer on the corner of his mouth. "The Cornell family doesn't recognize Gordon. You can do it yourself. You can't kill anyone. Gordon is taken back to the deep city." At the same time, George's verdict followed. The judgment of the court of first instance is as follows. George was convicted of ill treatment of minors, fraud, kidnapping, and other crimes with a total of 30 years in prison and no reduction in sentence. The rain continued until November. The sun squeezed out from behind the clouds and shone brightly among the tall buildings. After work on Friday, I took off my badge and bag and squeezed into the overcrowded elevator. When I signed up for a new driving school, the instructor asked me if I wanted to go to practice this week. Don't go. Fingers slid briskly over the phone's keyboard, a smile on his brow. I'm going on a date this week. I got off the bus at the entrance of City and University and someone stopped me. Catherine. A man with black glasses and a plaid shirt stood not far away and called out to me, thin and thin. I vaguely felt that this person was familiar, but I couldn't remember who it was. Seeing that I didn't recognize it, the other party explained. The representative of the math class in the second year of high school. Who often asks you to talk about the topic, don't you remember? Scales fall from one's eyes. I laughed and said, what are you doing here? I had the rare idea of joking, and as Joshua did, winked at him naughtily. Guess. I saw Joshua walk out of the campus behind him. Seeing me from afar, Joshua quickened his pace. I set my eyes on Joshua. Good. I took 2 steps back, hung my hair over my ears, and squinted. I'm with Joshua. You. Goodbye. I interrupted him. We'll talk when I'm free. The school gate was full of people, and Joshua stretched out his arms to me from a distance, and I ran over and threw myself into his arms. Who's that man? The tone was thick with vinegar. I tilted my head and thought for a moment. I won't tell you. Cut. What's going to eat tonight? Didn't you say you wanted to eat a crab feast last time? I booked a place in advance, and I'll come over to eat later. Okay. I went to the movies after eating. And I heard that the recent Godzilla is very good. Don't go. What's that for? Go home. Why are you going back so early? Guess. The end of full text.